Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know how we do it around here? We take one really fascinating subject and we dive deep.
Yeah, we do.
And today's topic is, well, let's just say it's a real fishy situation,
Hmm.
but in a good way. We're going to be talking about the Apache trout.
Ah, yes, the Apache trout. A true conservation success story.
Exactly. This fish was once on the brink of extinction, but thanks to some really dedicated conservation efforts, it's made a remarkable comeback.
Really remarkable.
So we're going to be diving into some excerpts from, well, it's basically a whole report on this little fish.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really fascinating. We'll be looking not just at the fish itself, but, what its story tells us about conservation and all that.
And there's a lot to learn from this one, for sure.
So before we get ahead of ourselves, can you maybe set the scene for our listeners? What exactly does this fish look like? What makes it so unique?
Well, picture this. A fish with this beautiful golden yellow body, and it's covered in these black spots, mostly clustered around its dorsal fin. And here's the real kicker. It has this distinctive black strub running right through its eyes.
Almost like a mask.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little bandit. The Apache trout can grow pretty big, too, anywhere from 6 to 24 inches long.
Wow, that's a decent-sized fish.
Yeah, and some of the bigger ones can even weigh up to 5 pounds.
I'm already picturing this bandit fish. And you mentioned it's one of only two trout species native to Arizona,
That's right. It makes it pretty special, ecologically speaking.
I bet. And where exactly can we find this masked marvel?
Well, it's a bit of a homebody. You'll only find the Apache trout in these really specific spots, the high elevation streams of the White Mountains in Arizona.
High elevation, so I'm guessing they like it cold.
Oh, yeah, they need those cold, clear waters. Specifically, they're found in the Salt and Little Colorado River watersheds. And it's not just the temperature, the water has to have high oxygen levels, too.
Sounds pretty picky.
And there's one more crucial detail. The stream bottom has to be gravel. It's super important for spawning, you see. They lay their eggs in the gravel.
Ah, so it's like their nursery.
You got it. So yeah, you can see how this specific habitat makes them, well, makes them really vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the trout in the stream.
Hmm.
How did this species with such specific needs end up on the brink of extinction?
Sadly, a lot of it comes down to us humans. I mean, our actions have had some unintended consequences.
Right.
Like, for example, deforestation. When we clear forests, the soil erodes and washes into the streams. That's sedimentation, and it makes the water murky.
So less of that clear water they need.
Exactly. And then there's agricultural runoff. Fertilizers and pesticides, all those chemicals, they end up polluting the water too.
And that can be good for the trout.
Definitely not. But it's not just about pollution and habitat degradation. We actually introduced some new characters to the story.
Oh, like what?
Other trout species.
Wait, how is that a bad thing? More fish, more fun, right?
Well, not in this case. We introduced species like rainbow trout and brook trout, and they started competing with the Apache trout for food and habitat.
So too many chefs in the kitchen.
Right. But it gets worse. These non-native trout started interbreeding with the Apache trout.
You mean making babies?
Yeah, exactly. And that's called hybridization. And it really messed with the Apache trout's unique genetic makeup.
I mean, I get that mixing genes can be good sometimes, but why was it bad for the Apache trout?
Well, think about it. The Apache trout had spent like centuries adapting to their very specific environment.
Right.
Their genes were fine-tuned to those cold, clear, high-oxygen waters. When they bred with these non-native trout, their offspring, well, they inherited a mix of genes that weren't as well suited to those conditions.
So it's like a recipe where you add the wrong ingredients. It just messes up the whole dish.
Perfect analogy. And on top of all that, overfishing added even more pressure to the struggling population.
Man, it sounds like these fish were really up against it.
They were. But, and this is the good part, people started to notice. And they started to care.
So how did they turn things around? It sounds like a pretty complicated problem.
It was. But the key was collaboration. Different groups realized they had to work together to save the Apache trout.
Who are the main players?
Well, the White Mountain Apache tribe was absolutely crucial. They knew these lands and waters better than anyone.
Right.
They established protected areas, closed off certain streams to fishing, and put in strict regulations.
So they're like, hey, back off. This is our fish.
Pretty much. And then you had the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arizona Game and Fish Department stepping in. They started these amazing captive breeding and reintroduction programs.
Captive breeding, so like raising them in captivity.
Exactly. They'd carefully collect some wild Apache trout, breed them in controlled environments, and then release the offspring back into the streams.
That's so cool. It's like giving them a head start, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, it wasn't easy. I mean, they had to make sure those captive bred fish were genetically diverse, healthy, and ready to survive in the wild.
I bet there were some challenges along the way.
Yeah.
What were some of the hurdles they had to overcome?
Oh, there are a few. For one, they had to be super careful about selecting the breeding pairs
Why?
to avoid inbreeding. If you keep breeding closely related fish, you lose genetic diversity.
And that's bad
Because genetic diversity is what makes a species resilient. It's what allows them to adapt to changes in the environment.
so like a safety net for the species.
Exactly. And the other big challenge was mimicking the natural stream conditions in the breeding facilities.
Like making a mini version of their habitat.
Yeah, like a five-star hotel for trout. They had to get the water temperature just right, the oxygen levels, everything.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was. But all that effort, all that collaboration, it paid off.
And that brings us to the happy ending.
You got it. The Apache trout population has rebounded so well that they've actually been proposed for removal from the endangered species list.
Wow, that's incredible. A true success story. So as we're wrapping up here, I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from all of this?
Well, for me, it really shows the power of understanding a species' needs. It wasn't just about protecting the fish. It was about understanding and restoring their entire ecosystem.
Right.
And of course, it highlights the importance of partnerships. I mean, you had tribal authorities, government agencies, conservation groups all working together.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. And, this kind of success can be replicated. There are other species out there facing similar challenges.
So this is a story of hope, right?
Yeah.
We can turn things around if we put in the effort and work together.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I have a question for you, dear listener. What other species might benefit from this kind of approach? And what role can you play in making a difference? It can be as simple as educating yourself about local conservation issues, reducing your environmental footprint, or maybe even supporting organizations that are out there protecting wildlife. Every little bit counts. The Apache Trout story is a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in safeguarding the amazing biodiversity of our planet.